Near the Stemmons freeway sign were two of the most suspicious characters in Dealey Plaza that day, despite their activities and the fact that both were captured in several photographs made at the time. This pair was never mentioned publicly until the House Select Committee on Assassinations investigation in the late 1970s. So weird. Hello and welcome back to my channel. And if you are new, then welcome. I'm Jess, Connell, and I would love to earn your subscription today. We are in our walkthrough of the JFK assassination through literature. And in each episode, we are taking on a different book or a different set of books in order to answer specific questions as we just walk chronologically and logically through the assassination. We started with some front material, just setting up the mood of the political moment, the mood of the Kennedy family, the mood of Lyndon Johnson and some of the Texas oil men, so that we could get a sense of these are the issues that undergird this particular moment in history. But now we have moved through the actual moments of the assassination, but we are still in the point of time where investigations haven't quite started. We are looking at actual witnesses and kind of walking through. It's like the title of this series is JFK Circling the Truth. And now it is like we are circling Dealey Plaza, just looking at different angles, different people, different facts, trying to ground ourselves in which things can we stand on that are verifiably true. So today we are getting into two very famous men. One of them in particular has a fun name that has always been associated with this particular character of the JFK assassination. And so we are going to get into Umbrella Man and Dark Complected Man. These are the two men that are standing right near the Stemmons freeway sign. Those are the long time names for them, and we're going to get into that. First, we are going to ground ourselves a little bit in some of the pages prior to that section here in Crossfire. This book, if you don't know, is the basis for Oliver Stone's movie JFK. It's called Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy by Jim Marrs. And it is thick. And actually, my husband has been reading it. He doesn't have near as much time as I do to read about JFK topics, but he saw this one on the list. He saw it on the stack and he grabbed it and has started reading it. And he is a good ways in, you guys. So he can hang with our JFK discussions, and he definitely is intrigued and fascinated like the rest of us. But today we're going to be getting into those two men. First, we're going to start a little bit before, because when I was choosing this selection, I just noticed a name that I wanted to, and I noticed that he deals with it a bit more than what our previous treatment had done. And so I just thought we would go ahead and get a little bit more information about Julia Ann Mercer before we move on toward those two men there. So he says a similar incident, so talking about a foreknowledge or somebody who saw something interesting before the assassination, involved Julia Ann Mercer. Mercer, then 23 years old, later told authorities that shortly before 11 a.m., the day of the assassination, she was driving a rented white Valiant west on Elm Street, just past the point where Kennedy was killed about 2 hours later. Just after passing through the triple underpass, she found her traffic lane blocked by a green Ford pickup truck. Okay, this is actually describing a place that's different than what I have said, so I'm glad we're reading this. If this is accurate, she actually went through the triple underpass and is going right behind there. Interesting. One of the things that you need to know if you look at a map is there's Dealey Plaza, where the shooting happened. Then there's that triple underpass, which is a railroad bridge. Then you go through and there is an on-ramp, or there was an on-ramp, and it's still there, but now there's an additional bridge across. But there's an on-ramp that went towards Stemmons Freeway, which is where the president ended up going on his way to Parkland. But that bridge for Stemmons Freeway was where Ed Hoffman was sitting later in the day. So just so we have our bridges straight, this description is that she's actually past the triple underpass and just past it. While waiting, so it's kind of the backside of, if you've ever seen that photo where the policeman drops his motorcycle and runs up the grassy knoll and gets up toward the railroad bridge. This would be just over that crest on the backside of that same hill. While waiting for the truck to move, she saw a young man get out of the truck, walk to a long tool compartment along the side, and remove a long paper bag. She could see the outlines of a rifle in the bag. The man then walked up on the grassy knoll carrying the package and was lost to her sight. She described this man as in his late 20s or early 30s, wearing a gray jacket, brown pants, a plaid shirt, and some sort of wool stocking cap with a tassel on it. Mercer said as she pulled alongside the truck, she locked eyes with the driver, whom she described as heavily built with a round face and light brown hair. She said during this time she saw 3 Dallas policemen standing by a motorcycle on the underpass, talking. In Warren Commission Document 205, a policeman did tell of seeing the truck, but believed that it had broken down. When she was finally able to change lanes, Mercer drove on towards Fort Worth, stopping at the halfway point of the Dallas-Fort Worth Toll Road, which is now Interstate 30, that's interesting, to have breakfast. While eating, she told her experience to some policemen, commenting, "The Secret Service is not very secret." She assumed they were the Secret Service. Later, as she drove on toward Fort Worth, she was stopped by the policeman whom informed her of the assassination and took her back to Dallas for questioning. She was held for several hours and questioned by both local and federal authorities, although no one showed her a badge or identified himself. That matches Jean Hill's descriptions. She talks about sort of the chaos of that day, and you're kind of assuming that the people who are questioning you or grabbing you or walking you are officials, but you see no identification, affirming that. Early the next morning, FBI men came to her home and took her back to the Dallas Sheriff's Office, where she was shown some photographs of various men. She picked out 2 as the men she had seen in the truck the day before. Turning one photo over, she read the name Jack Ruby. I want to point out to you that this happened the day before Ruby shot Lee Oswald. So Kennedy was shot one day. The next day, she is there at the Dallas Sheriff's Office identifying Jack Ruby as one of the 2 men that she had seen in the truck. So it's not as if Sunday has already happened, Oswald has already been shot, and now she's just kind of retroactively going, oh yeah, that guy we've seen on the TV, that's him. She's saying it on Saturday. During the TV coverage of the Oswald shooting the next day, Mercer claims she again recognized Ruby as the man driving the truck and that Oswald resembled the man carrying the rifle. Oh, interesting. I hadn't heard that detail, that she thought Oswald looked like the other person. Oswald's mother also claimed to have been shown a picture of Ruby prior to the Sunday shooting of her son. Mercer later claimed that her story concerning the truck and its occupants was twisted and changed by both the FBI and the Dallas Sheriff's Office. Mercer's experience may have been partly corroborated by another Dallasite, Julius Hardy, who told the Dallas Morning News years later that on the morning of November 22nd, he saw 3 men on top of the triple underpass carrying long arms, although he could not tell if they were rifles or shotguns. Hardy said he reported the incident to the FBI, but no such report has been made public. I wonder how many situations there are where there was a report made and it just was kind of like, oh, this one can slip away into oblivion. As the motorcade arrived in Dealey Plaza, it passed almost 20 sheriff's deputies who were standing at the intersection of Main and Houston in front of the sheriff's office. One of them was, my understanding is, Roger Craig was standing right there, and that he found it odd. He had been through, many different events in his career, and he found it odd that their force of those sheriffs was just all being collected right there. He felt like he was almost chomping at the bit, like, let's go protect this guy. And he found it odd that they were all told to stand there, and then he heard the shots from there and took off running. We're going to hear Roger Craig's account in a couple of episodes, but that is the portion that includes Julia Ann Mercer. I just thought you guys would enjoy that. I hope you did. It gives us a bit more information. I knew that she had identified Jack Ruby as one of the men. I did not realize that she had said that one of the men sort of resembled Oswald. That's very fascinating. Okay, we are on to the section that this whole episode is going to be about. It's called Two Suspicious Men. Near the Stemmons freeway sign were two of the most suspicious characters in Dealey Plaza that day, despite their activities and the fact that both were captured in several photographs made at the time. This pair was never mentioned publicly until the House Select Committee on Assassinations investigation in the late 1970s. So weird. Now, I will say the documentation that we have now, where we can go back and we can find photos from various angles and piece together, okay, Jean and Marianne were standing right there. Okay, directly across from them was this family. Okay, up here was this man or whatever. We can do that. Those things were kept even suspiciously under wraps. There was definitely a control factor in what the average American was given access to. Even, of course, the Zapruder film that people didn't see for almost 12 years before it was publicized, not by Life magazine, not by Mr. Zapruder, not by our own government, but by Robert Groden on the Geraldo Show. So we didn't have all the evidence. And even in the Zapruder film, you can see the edge of the umbrella man, but you don't get a frontal view because Zapruder was standing from behind them. And so you get the edge, you get like the scalloped edge of part of the umbrella, but you don't get to see both men there very plainly. About the time that Kennedy was hit by a bullet, two men standing near each other on the north sidewalk of Elm Street acted most strangely. One began pumping a black umbrella, while the other waved his right arm high in the air. Very interesting activities of both. Now, when you look along the route before this, there's virtually no umbrellas. The day had stopped raining. There was no need for an umbrella. I haven't actually gone through and scoured the entire crowd to be able to say there were none, but I'm not aware of any others. But we could give Umbrella Man a little bit of grace, just that I'm not 100% sure that there weren't any other umbrellas that day. But when you see other people on the sidelines, what you see are this, people are excited, they're waving, they're excited, they're all eager, they're noticing, they're turned with their attention, but not this. And so you have two men standing together. And the reason why we see them together, it's not just how they're standing in this moment, but later we'll see more activity from these two men that makes us view them as a pair. These and subsequent actions by this pair aroused the suspicions of researchers over the years, yet the initial federal investigation ignored both men. Their activities are known only through analysis of assassination photographs. As Kennedy's limousine began the gentle descent into Dealey Plaza, a man can be seen standing near the street side edge of the Stemmons freeway sign, holding an open umbrella. He holds the umbrella in a normal fashion, and the top of the umbrella almost reaches the bottom of the sign. In photos taken minutes before Kennedy's arrival, the umbrella is closed. And immediately after the shooting, pictures show the umbrella was closed again. The man's umbrella was only open during the shooting sequence. Furthermore, as seen in the Zapruder film, once Kennedy is exactly opposite the man with the umbrella, it was pumped almost 2 feet into the air and lowered. At the same time, the second man, in photos he appears to be dark complected, perhaps a black man or Hispanic, raised his right hand into the air, possibly making a fist. This man was located on the outer edge of the Elm Street sidewalk opposite the umbrella man, who was on the inner edge. The man with the open umbrella was the only person in Dealey Plaza with an open umbrella. Under the warm Texas sun, there was no reason to carry an open umbrella at that time. Two main theories have emerged concerning the Umbrella Man and his activities that day. Assassination researcher Robert Cutler has long maintained that the umbrella may have been a sophisticated weapon that fired a dart or flechette filled with a paralyzing agent. Cutler's theory is supported by 1975 testimony of a CIA weapons developer who told the Senate Intelligence Committee that just such an umbrella was in the hands of the spy agency in 1963. So that theory would be that upon opening the umbrella, that there would have been some perhaps air-powered dart gun that would shoot out a tranquilizing agent. Now, you would have to be quite skilled at the use of this brand new umbrella weapon to get a dart gun to miraculously hit in the exact right spot. Not Connolly's forehead, not Jackie's cheek, not the seat cushion, not one of the Secret Service agents driving, but that you would hit the president, and I mean, perhaps according to this theory, they accuse it of being somewhere else, but you'd have to be quite precise to, for sure, hit the president with such a weapon. Nevertheless, I say that I do want to honor that the early researchers were doing their research with very little information. They did not have the internet. They were piecing together articles, they were mailing out articles and sending information to one another and sharing information and hosting each other in their homes. So we don't want to be too snotty as we come from this perspective going, oh my goodness, they thought an umbrella, because they were just trying to be mindful of all the possibilities. And let's face it, a guy standing there whose umbrella is closed, but only during the shooting of the president does his umbrella come open and he pumps it up and down. That is an odd behavior. And they were right to look at this man askance and wonder, what was he doing? And was there something else attached to his actions with the umbrella? It is not foolish. It is wise to consider any and all possible options. And this was one. Interesting that the CIA had such a weapon. Cutler theorized that the umbrella was used to fire a paralyzing dart into Kennedy, immobilizing him for marksmen with rifles. He claims this theory accounts for the small puncture wound in Kennedy's throat described by Dallas doctors, but which was altered by the time of the Bethesda autopsy. According to Cutler, this dart explains Kennedy's lack of motion during the shooting sequence. Since such a weapon existed, and since both the actions of Kennedy and the Umbrella Man were consistent with the operation of such a weapon, Cutler's theory cannot be completely dismissed. However, most assassination researchers prefer the alternative theory that both of these suspicious men may have been providing visual signals to hidden gunmen. This theory suggests that Kennedy was killed by a crossfire, coordinated by radio men. I want to point out that there are at least 2 radio men who have been identified, and we are going to talk about one of them, but one of the ones that was identified was by Lee Bowers. He talked about a person driving in the car back in that railroad yard that morning, just before the assassination. I believe in the 30 minutes prior to the assassination, he observed someone appearing to talk on a shortwave radio that he describes basically like a walkie-talkie, while driving their vehicle right there. So there, in addition to what we're going to read today, there was evidence of radio chatter and actions happening in Dealey Plaza that day connected to radio chatter. The 2 men who were among the closest bystanders to the president when he was first struck gave signals indicating that he was not fatally hit and therefore more shots were needed. So you can picture it. They're standing there and maybe they see, oh, he's already been shot in the head. Then they don't need to raise their umbrella or raise their fist. But because they see that he's just immobilized but not hit, they are each pumping with a very visible action. A fascinating twist on this latter theory came from researcher Gary Shaw, who said the 2 men may have been providing Kennedy with a last-second sign of who was responsible for his death. Shaw recalled that throughout the planning of the Bay of Pigs invasion, CIA officers had promised an umbrella of air protection of the Cuban invaders. This umbrella failed to materialize because Kennedy refused to authorize U.S. military support for the invasion. According to Shaw's theory, the man with the open umbrella symbolized the promise of an air support umbrella, while the dark-complected man may have been one of the anti-Castro Cuban leaders known to Kennedy. Thus, in the last seconds of his life, Kennedy may have seen the open umbrella and the face of a Cuban he knew was involved in the Bay of Pigs and realized who was participating in his death. But this is all speculation. The existence of the umbrella man and the dark-complected man is a fact. Even their activities after the assassination bear study. While virtually everyone in Dealey Plaza was moved to action by the assassination, either falling to the ground for cover or moving toward the grassy knoll, you think through the witnesses that we've talked about. Marianne Moorman is almost paralyzed by this, and she falls down and is just stunned. And then there's photos of her talking to reporters and questioners afterwards. Jean Hill is similarly stunned, but she leaves her friend and she runs across through the grassy knoll. The families that we've seen, they drop down and are covering their kids. And most of the crowd moves towards the grassy knoll. Not these two guys. Let's listen to what they do. Here, while virtually everyone else is doing one of those two things, either falling down or running up to the grassy knoll, these two men sat down beside each other on the north sidewalk of Elm Street. Here, the dark-complected man appears to put a walkie-talkie to his mouth. I'll put up the photos so you can see this. I'm just going to leave them up while I'm reading. And you guys, these are two of the people who fascinate me the most about the assassination. I do more reading into things like Ruth, Paine, and Jack Ruby because I think obviously they populate the story far more frequently and we have much more information about them. But these two men are utterly fascinating to me, and I hope to you as well. In a photograph taken by Jim Towner, what seems to be an antenna can be seen jutting out from behind the man's head while his right hand holds some object to his face. Several photos taken in the seconds following the assassination show both of these men sitting together on the side of Elm Street, there at the sidewalk. That is why we consider them a pair, because while during the assassination sequence, they don't necessarily appear to be together. One is standing with his umbrella, one is standing up ahead of him with his fist. In a crowd like this, you wouldn't necessarily be able to say, oh, those two are together. But then they sit down together, and one of them is talking on his radio. Let's keep reading. Moments later, the man with the umbrella gets up, takes one last look toward the motorcade, still passing under the triple underpass, and begins walking east in the direction of the depository. The dark-complected man saunters toward the triple underpass, passing people rushing up the grassy knoll. He can be seen stuffing some object, perhaps the walkie-talkie, into the back of his pants. Despite the suspicious actions of these two men, there is no evidence that the FBI or the Warren Commission made any effort to identify or locate them. Officially, they did not exist. Yet over the years, this pair became the focal point of criticism by private researchers. Researchers claimed that the lack of investigation of these men was indicative of the shallowness of the government's handling of the assassination. Indeed, what other conclusion could you come to but that is an indication that they just weren't digging very hard. They're not that curious. Once the House Select Committee on Assassinations was formed, researchers urged an investigation of both men. The committee finally released a photograph of the Umbrella Man to the news media and urged anyone with knowledge of the man to come forward. Coincidentally, if it was a coincidence, the Umbrella Man suddenly was identified in Dallas a few weeks after this national appeal. In August 1978, a telephone caller told researcher Penn Jones Jr. that the man with the umbrella was a former Dallas insurance salesman named Louis Stephen Witt. Jones contacted some local newsmen, and together they confronted Witt, who was then working as a warehouse manager. Witt refused to talk with newsmen, but acknowledged that he was in Dealey Plaza on the day Kennedy was killed. Jones later wrote, "I felt the man had been coached. He would answer no questions and pointedly invited us to leave. His only positive statement, which seemed to come very quickly, was that he was willing to appear before the House Select Committee on Assassinations in Washington." So that's our first encounter with this man, Witt. I'll tell you, I have questions about whether or not he is the actual man. The photos are too grainy to be able to make an absolute identification of the person. We'll read. Let's keep reading. Witt indeed appeared before the committee during its public testimony. His story was comic relief compared to the intense scrutiny of witnesses like Marina Oswald and Warren Commission critics. His story was facile and improbable. And when the umbrella that Witt claimed was the same one he had in Dealey Plaza in 1963 was displayed, it suddenly turned wrong side out, prompting one committee member to quip, "I hope that's not a weapon." Yeah, so when it's going to be displayed and they push it up and open, it goes too far. You know, the classic inverted umbrella, that's the way it looked. It does make it absurd. It does make it a joke. And this is no joking matter. Witt told the committee that on the spur of the moment, he grabbed a large black umbrella and went to Dealey Plaza to heckle Kennedy. He claimed that someone had told him that an open umbrella would rile Kennedy. While Witt offered no further explanation of how his umbrella could heckle the president, committee members theorized that the umbrella could in some way refer to the pro-German sympathies of Kennedy's father while serving as U.S. ambassador to Britain just prior to World War II. They said the umbrella may have symbolized the appeasement policies of Britain's Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, who always carried an umbrella. I think I went sort of maybe halfway up the grassy area on the north side of Elm Street. This is Witt. Somewhere in that vicinity. I'm pretty sure I sat down. When the motorcade approached, I think I got up and started fiddling with that umbrella, trying to get it open. And at the same time, I was walking forward, walking toward the street. Whereas other people, I understand, saw the president shot and his movements, I did not see this because of this thing, the umbrella in front of me. My view of the car during that length of time was blocked by the umbrellas being open. Based on the available photographs made that day, none of Witt's statements were an accurate account of the actions of the umbrella man who stood waiting for the motorcade with his umbrella in the normal over-the-head position and then pumped it in the air as Kennedy passed. Yeah, you know what's funny about this is just coming on the heels of our Connell episode, Connolly's movements, he describes them all. He describes them almost immediately. And you have to realize, too, that Connolly has this whole series of events happen to him, and then he's basically unconscious. He goes into surgery. He has bullet wounds in his body that he's recovering from. His wrist is shattered. They're pulling out bullet fragments, and they're clanging in a pan. He wakes up and is still clearer about what he experienced in the moments prior to his trauma than this guy is. That's an interesting thing. He's able to describe the quantity of bullets. He's able to describe his own motions, trying to turn this way, not seeing anything, starting to turn this way and intending to go the full amount when he's hit. He gives a description and it exactly matches his actions in the Zapruder film. Not so with Witt. He comes up with this description, and none of it is what we see at all. Him sitting down, ambling around, struggling with the... No. And then not being able to see? No. The umbrella is up over his head. You can see him. And then it goes up. It goes up. Witt's bizarre story, unsubstantiated and totally at variance with the actions of the man in the photographs, resulted in few, if any, researchers accepting Louis Stephen Witt as the umbrella man. And there continues to be no official accounting for the dark-complected man who appears to have been talking on the radio moments after the assassination. This is interesting. They asked him about his connection to this man. The House committee failed to identify or locate this man, and Witt claimed he had no recollection of such a person, despite photographs that seemed to show the umbrella man talking with the dark man. Witt claimed only to recall that a, quote, Negro man sat down near him and kept repeating, They done shot them folks. Interestingly, one of the committee attorneys asked Witt specifically if he recalled seeing the man with a walkie-talkie, although officially no one has ever admitted the possibility of radios in use in Dealey Plaza. These two men are still among the mystery people of Dealey Plaza. So that gets us to the end of our discussion into these two men. Again, they're not like central characters. We're not talking about, Lee Oswald. We're not talking about Jack Ruby, but they are among this cast of characters in Dealey Plaza that some of them just happened to be there, like we talked about with Jim Tague, where he just he was on his way to a date, couldn't get through, stops, arrives just at the moment of the motorcade, and ends up being a part of the investigation because of being hit by some of the matter that came off of one of the bullets that went astray from the car. So some of them like that just happened into the scene. And then there's some people like these two that you just have to scratch your head. What were they doing there? What was the radio about? They did appear to be together. So here Robert has given us who was the umbrella man, and you can see him there. Do you see his face? I see his face. There's the umbrella in Zapruder. Here's the umbrella. I see his face. Here's the umbrella and see the difference between where the umbrella is barely cupped over his head versus way up high. And this man appears to be holding his hand in a fist. Then the two men sit down. Here's the silly moment when it inverts. You can see everybody, oh, she's laughing. Isn't it funny? No, it's not funny. We don't find it funny in the least. But those are the umbrella man movements. And we're all left wondering what in the world was going on with Umbrella Man. For my part, Umbrella Man reminds me in kind of the yellow stripes. It is an oddity that only occurs right in the kill zone. The yellow stripes were only there in the kill zone. Umbrella Man and Radio Man are sitting there right at ground zero of the murder of our president. And their behaviors are odd. They do seem to be together. They do appear to be looking back at the same thing while one of them is talking on the radio. There appears to be coordination and odd behaviors. And about dark complected man, I want to say too, that as I've read through other accounts, for example, one witness that was in the jail across the street from the 6th floor depository says that he saw two men and one of them was dark complected and looked as if he could be of some sort of Cuban or Hispanic origin. So in my mind, that puts at least two people there who are in a group that is paired up and working together, and also it to be the potential that there were Cubans angry at Kennedy. It seems significant to me and something that we need to pay attention to, that potentially there was a dark complected person in the 6th floor window in that sniper's nest, and that we have evidence of a dark complected person here with Umbrella Man making an odd visual cue right at the moment of shooting. Then they sit down together. Then they go off in opposite directions. Odd behavior. You guys let me know in the comments what you think. Do you find these guys fascinating? Do you have other information you want to share with viewers about these two men? Put it all in the comments. I can't wait to read it. Next time, we are going to be getting into, you guys, this is one of the first books that I purchased, and I purchased this back before I ever even started this channel. I had done some digging into, if I really want to understand the Kennedy assassination, what are some unexpected books that I would want to read in order to understand? And this book by Seth Cantor, who we sometimes hear about, he was a reporter here, but is called Who Was Jack Ruby? The startling until now unrevealed facts about Jack Ruby's ties to the FBI, CIA, and organized crime. So we are going to read through a selection or several selections from this together next time. So come back for that. Jack Ruby, for me, I just mentioned it, is like Ruth Paine, where I feel like he is a decoder ring that helps us make sense of some things in the assassination. So come back. We're going to learn together and read together about Jack Ruby from someone who researched the Dickens out of this man. So come back. Can't wait for that with you guys. And I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye.